Hi, I'm Mark Fusco, and I'm really excited to be with you here today as we kick off Kata versus MMA. I'm the creator of this program, and I'd like to share a little bit about myself and what the program entails. So I am an 8th degree black belt in karate, a 6th degree black belt in Jiu-Jitsu, and I have a full instructorship in Jeet-Kune Do. I've been doing martial arts for about 48 years, and I'll share more of that with you as we get going, but I know the reason why you're really here is because of that title, and you probably want to know more about it. So is this guy getting out there with kata, he's getting in the ring and away we go? Well, I think that what we're trying to do here, and what I've tried to do, and hopefully you will as well, is functionalize our karate so that we have something that's usable in an MMA influenced world. While you could certainly have a MMA fighter take these skill sets into the ring, what I'm really looking at is the fact that over time, MMA has influenced street violence. And I think that we need to address that and make sure our karate is capable of dealing with that. So I have always been interested in kata, and I've gone into a lot of deep research. It is not a rehash of the bunkai from my teachers. This is the research I've done over a number of years, and I've used it and pressure tested it in such a way that it stands up to MMA. So I hope you'll join me, and I hope you'll find this as interesting to participate in as it was for me to create it. Many traditional bunkai meaning kata explanation or technique, will really get a person in trouble with the new MMA knowledge that's out there. It sometimes is just due to the nature of the technique and the fact that skills have gone up to a higher level. It also has to deal with the fact that many kata bunkai require fine motor motions and also very good timing. Now the problem is under stress, both of those degrade with the adrenaline surge that happens, auditory exclusion, getting our vision very much tunnel vision in terms of what we're looking at. I mean, all these different physiological effects that happen. One of them is that fine motor motions go, and timing is much harder to come by. So in light of all that, I've had to do research and had to experiment to try to find the techniques that were usable in that pressure type situation. We did a lot of that through simulation testing. The other avenue that I'd like to talk about is the fact that the techniques that I have found are used over and over again, whether it be a striking situation, we could be talking about a squared off situation, which you might call a sparring situation, or what somebody might determine to be more of a self-defense situation where hands are down, there is communication going on before somebody decides to throw a strike. Those techniques are also the same techniques that are being used in situations with grabs or holds. So we're getting a repetition of skills and techniques from the bunkai, which allow you to minimize your training in terms of overall time, but the time that you are spending is being used most efficiently because you're having this repetition built into what you're doing. But the repetition requires you to adapt. So we're getting two very important aspects here. We're getting the repetition that you need to drive home those skill sets into your muscle memory, and you're also learning to adapt under pressure. So both of those are key items. Another point I'd like to make is that when you're using the same techniques and you're adapting them and you're going from simple touches all the way up to strikes and even weapons, it allows you to control the amount of force that you're using, how much violence you need in order to get the situation to end. So this gives you a force gamut, a range that you can work with so that you can adapt to the situation and you're not using an atomic bomb, okay, when a simple release from a grab will take care of everything else that you need. The designed outcome from kata is to result in a knockout or an opponent being taken to the ground where they could be submitted or struck a disabling blow. I know there's simpler situations where you're just getting a release from a hold or from there, but when we're talking about a definite situation when your life is in danger, those are the two goals that you're after as a karateka, is to knock them out or get them to the ground where you can submit them or you can give them a disabling blow. The reality is that knockouts are sometimes very hard to come by. I know there are people out there that feel that they're very good at that, but in the melee that happens of a fight, you can't always count on that. It's it's much easier in the overall aspect to get control of somebody and take them to the ground. So I'm not necessarily saying going to the ground for ground fighting, as you'll see as we get into this a little bit more with techniques down the road. But the whole point being here is that Kata has all of the skill sets that we need to make the latter happen. All right, so what do I mean by that? If we're looking at a posture or a movement in Kata, it can have multiple meanings. Those meanings could include a strike, it could be trapping, it could be clinching, off balancing, a throw, a submission hold. All of those aspects are included in Kata, and one position may represent more than just one thing. It may not just be a strike, okay? It could also be a way to break balance. So we'll see that as we move forward in my research, how that all comes into play. Another point I'd like to make about bunkai. It is possible to look at a kata in the order in which it's performed and take a look at the techniques, the bunkai that are there, and hook them all together to provide an answer to a situation. In the 90s, Taikaseyu Oyada, an Okinawan master, had relayed that bunkai is more like the positions and the movement in kata are more like letters in an alphabet. They're not really meant to be interpreted in direct order. So you can create a word by pulling elements from different parts of the kata to make that word. Then rearrange those same elements to get a different word. In other words, a different answer to another self-defense situation or a fighting situation by using the very same letters or positions or movements from the kata. This is an important thing to understand in interpretation, because sometimes people learn an explanation to bunkai that goes in the order with the kata and they think that's it. There's much more to that, and you also have the ability, once time goes by, to actually take bunkai from different katas and bring them together, because some of them naturally fit together. Masters had similar techniques that they were putting into their katas at different times, and naturally the human body only moves so many ways, so there are going to be repetitions of that motion. So at the same time I've been researching and experimenting with kata bunkai, one of the things that's come about for me is a lot of time on the internet, like I'm sure you have done as well. So that includes looking at a lot of street violence videos, trying to learn, what the bad guys are doing that are watching Bellator and UFC and how they're using that information. What I've noticed over time is a better use of kickboxing skills and ground grappling skills. But in between, it's an undefined mess. They don't seem to know what to do other than grab a hold and punch with the other hand. So there's a range in there that we can exploit, the clinching range, and that became very apparent to me. And at the same time I was doing my research, I was finding out there was more and more clinching and clinching type skills that were in kata. So if we look at clinching, if we look at off balancing, and we look at throwing, that would all meet that goal of getting an opponent to the ground where we can submit them or disable them. And all that's right there in our kata. So the bunkai, the research that went on, and the testing and experimenting revolved a lot around this area of the clinch. It became very exciting to me because this is an area that I had experience in from my jiu-jitsu background. And here I was finding information that was similar in karate. And it makes sense because the reality is they all needed a complete solution at the time this was all put together. It's only in recent history that karate has really been relegated to the idea of a striking art. And later on, we have more time. I'd like to sit down and discuss that with you on the research and my opinions on that area. But the excitement here for me is as all this was happening, it was starting to come together, that not only what I was seeing as this opportunity to exploit with the bad guys in the videos I was watching, I was also getting this information coming forth from the bunkai that I was doing in kata research. So we'll bring more of that. So at the same time I was doing all this research and experimentation with my kata, I had the chance to become a full instructor in Jeet-Kune-Do under Sigun Paul Vunak. I find myself, I have a lot of energy. I know that I'm not used to talking to the camera, and maybe my energy doesn't come through. I hope it does. My enthusiasm for this subject goes really deep, but I use that energy to try to find new ways to understand my original arts. So when I went into Jeet-Kune-Do, part of it was a natural growth process for myself. I'm always looking for world-class instructors to work with. Sifu Paul is amazing as an instructor, and he's really good at quickly pointing out to you where you're holding back, what's keeping you from going to that next level. So in taking Jeet Kune Do, and let me just add this, if you don't know about Paul Vunak, he's a direct student of Guru Dan Inosanto, who was a student of Bruce Lee. So, you know, it's pretty close lineage right there to Bruce Lee. But the amazing thing is that Paul Vunak was able to take the information that he's gotten from Guru Dan, and he's turned that into a military system that he taught to SEAL Team 6. So Paul Vunak was able to take the information he learned from Guru Dan Inosanto, and he turned it into a system that he trained SEAL Team 6 with. So SEAL Team 6 is obviously the elite, and they have very little time to put into hand-to-hand training with everything else they need to do. So it needs to be well-focused and well thought out. Whenever I look back at my time with Sifu Paul, there are lots of things that have helped me. Well, it basically gives you a new lens in which to look at your karate. And that's essentially what I used it for, is how do I take this new way of looking at the martial arts and take a look back at my karate and my kata research, and what does it bring forth for me in doing that? One of the things that I use consistently in putting together bunkai when I created sequences are the 3 goals of combat that Sifu Paul was using with SEAL Team 6. So those 3 are entry, pressure, and termination. So let me talk a little bit about those. Entry, the way I define it, and these are the words I put to the physicality that I got from Sifu Paul, is in that entry, we're looking for an opportunity to make the opponent react to us. We want to take control of the situation. We got to get him reacting to us instead of us reacting to him. As soon as that happens, you want to apply pressure. Now, in Jeet Kune Do, the straight blast is one of the main ways that they apply pressure that came from Wing Chun, okay? But it could be anything down the center line, and that's what they're thinking of when they do that. On a broader scope, pressure, what's the result of pressure? It's to break somebody's posture. That takes away their balance. That means they don't have power anymore, and we've negated their mobility. So in using that pressure, we are now turning the tide from this attack that maybe started on us. They're now reacting to us through the entry. We now have pressure, which has taken them out of their posture. And then we want to finish. Now, I use the term finish instead of terminate. Terminate's perfect for a military situation because most of the time you're trying to kill the person. In our situation, it's civilian. So we're not always looking to kill someone. So that's the reason why I like to use the term finish. So what am I looking for in the finish? Well, I want to use the amount of force necessary to end the violence. I want to end that violence, and then I want to assess the situation of what's going on, not only with that person, opponent, or opponents, but also what's going on around me, so that I'm aware of the situation as a whole. So those 3 goals of combat, I use those whenever I've been doing my research with my kata, because if we don't meet those 3 goals of combat, we're not going to be successful whenever we're faced with an attack. So all this is in the light of an MMA influenced world, and those 3 goals I found over and over again are possible with the bunkai that are in our kata. So kata has so many subjects we can talk about, and I'm going to have plenty of opportunities to do that with you. I'm so excited that you're here working with me. Keep in mind this idea of kata versus MMA. Again, yes, we could certainly take an elite athlete, teach him these skills, and have him use these skills in the ring, or her. She could use these skills as well. We've seen that happen. I think of John Jones. You know, he will pull things that come from various martial arts that we wouldn't expect to be able to be used. Same thing with GSP and so many other great martial artists that compete. They could certainly use these skills. But I think for you and me, what we really care about is there are bad guys out there. We know there's evil in the world. We know that they are watching MMA too. We know they're learning from watching that, and they can use that with us as well. So we've got that whole idea that we're trying to address here. We've got the fact that the bunkai that I'm going to share with you, that I've been able to research and put together with experimentation, is bunkai that can be used in many different ways. It's not just for one type of attack, one type of situation. It allows you to adapt and to use force on a continuum. There's so many great things that you'll see there. I'm going to bring in elements with our 3 goals of combat that are going to be able to focus what we do and make sense of why we've arranged things the way we have in terms of taking different elements from positions or movement in kata and why we're using them the way we're using them. You know, that whole use of exploiting the clinch area, you know, that was a very exciting time for me when I started to realize that that was such really an undefined area for what it seems to me are most people that are utilizing MMA type skill sets in the street. They will attach themselves by grabbing on and hitting, but they don't have any control really over the other person. They're just using that to find range and using that to know where the person is, when there's so much more that can go into the clinching, the off balancing, and then that allows us to get that throw and put them on the ground, where we can use a submission, or we can strike them with a disabling blow. Hey, we can even pin them. The other great thing about clinching, and you're going to find out with our kata, is that those clinch skills that we get from kata are also very helpful when it comes to dealing with weapons. That'll come down the line as well. So I look forward to working with you. I hope this introduction gives you some idea of what kata versus MMA is about, and we'll look forward to working with you. Please help us continue to bring you some great videos by subscribing to our channel and sharing our videos.